Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Zadov's Chess Channel, and welcome to the TCEC Season 20 Superfinal between the two top engines, Leela C0 and Stockfish NNUe. So really wild things happened. 74 games have been played so far, still 26 more to come. And Stockfish took a comfortable 2-point lead in the finals. Then Leela C0 equalized. Then again, Stockfish took the lead. Again, Leela C0 equalized. Then again, Stockfish took the lead. Again, Leela C0 equalized. So it was a wild finals, and now we're in the round 71, in which Stockfish NNUe had the white pieces and Leela C0 had the black pieces. This was, in my opinion, one of the wildest games so far. It had really, again, this first of all, this beautiful strategical elements, and then afterwards this beautiful tactical elements that only these two engines, I think, can perform now these days. So let's check out now the game. As usual, we have the sound round 1 and fight. So here Stockfish NNUe played the move e4, and in the video I'm going to reveal you now the current result. Still, as I'm recording this video, also some other games are played, so you can also watch and follow this TCEC on their official site, or you can check out the results also on chessbomb.com. So here e4, e6, we have the French, d4, d5, still common here, of course, e5, we have this advanced variation of the French defense. In my opinion, it's really one of the best ways to proceed. You are not allowing your opponent to get out with some knight to f6 moves like in the Steins. We're advancing the opponent here. Black has already troubles with the knight. You are taking away this very important square, f6 for the knight. So we have b6. This was still prearranged. h4 immediately by Stockfish NNUe. Queen to d7, and that was the last prearranged line. The idea behind this move is to go into positional trades of pieces. I've mentioned it many times, and I'll mention it again because I think these strategies are very important. Of course, when it comes to tactics, these engines are simply too strong, but basically they're applying also some human strategies. First of all, what we can notice, again, I've talked about this idea I think 100 times in my videos, but maybe you're watching my video for the first time, so I wanted to explain you that we have now the so-called block pawn structure. It means white is coordinating the attack towards the king side, black is coordinating the attack towards the queen side, because the pawns are showing us the direction. When we have this block pawn structure, I've talked also a million times, I think, about the relation between bishops and pawns. So it means, you see, we have now these two immobile pawns in the center, so it means our dark square bishop is not so good. It is a little bit blocked out by its own pawn. So that's the same thing also for the light square bishop of black. You see, block pawn structure, pawns are immobile, so you cannot move this bishop. So one of the basic strategies of this particular line of blacks is simply to go bishop to a6 and trade off a bad piece, trade off the bad bishop. But the problem then afterwards, after potential bishop to a6, is that the knight is on a weird square. The knight is gonna on a6, it's on the edge of the board. That's why it's not so well placed. You want, of course, to play the normal moves for your knight in c5, then maybe knight to c6, challenging the center here. So it has, of course, its advantages. It has also this disadvantages, this common strategy by black. So here in the game, knight to d2 play by Stockfish NNUe, and c5 by Leela C0. We have now h5. This move I really like because the Stockfish NNUe gives up first the centralized pawn, but this pawn can never be protected. Even if you take, we can play knight to f3. If you try knight to c6, maybe we can try knight to b3, and still we would then attack this pawn 3 times. So it's unprotectable. So that's why it's very good to continue our attack without first protecting our pawn. Many of us, I think, would play something like c3 and would try to hang on to our pawn central control, onto our space advantage. But Stockfish NNUe has, of course, different ideas. h5 immediately, challenging now the king side. We have c takes d5, c takes d4, knight to f3, and now comes this idea, bishop to a6. And it's okay. It's a very pragmatic idea here for black. Bishop takes a6. We got rid of our bad bishop. The light square bishop was really a bad piece for black, and after bishop to a6, knight takes a6, but now knight to d4, rook to c8. Very good move here by Leela C0, although the evaluation is better for white, but still Leela C0 is fighting here. You see now, when we traded off the bad bishop, this bishop's activity is perfectly fine, but still this is really wild already. It's a common idea, of course, to attack the flanks in such an early stage of the game, but actually this move h5 was a theoretical novelty So here in move 6 we have seen already a theoretical novelty by Stockfish and NNUe. This position has never been played so far in chess history. So let's go to this move, rook to c8. We have now a4. The idea is also now to break here and also stop a little bit black's potential progress here on the queen side, because black will probably try a minority attack. If black manages to get this position, maybe something like a6, then maybe b5, and then maybe try to maneuver this knight and cement it to c4. This could be very dangerous. So that's why this a4 move is a very, very nice prophylactic move here by Stockfish NNUe. Knight to e7. If you try bishop to c5, there is also a wild line. You have knight to b3. Then knight takes d4. Bishop to d4 could be played. We can take knight takes d4. And now after knight to b4, we could play c3. After knight to c6, queen to g4. That's something that I think is bothering here black. This queen, when the queen comes so actively into the game, you are already in serious troubles. You would be forced to play something like king to f8, but now h6. You see, h6 would be a brutal move. After knight to h6, rook to h6 is here a great sacrifice. G takes h6, bishop to h6, and it's already a losing game. King to e7 or king to e8 are simply bad, because we can simply play queen to g5. Again, you have only this square, king to g8, king to e8, and now queen to g7 attacking the rook. The rook doesn't have good squares to protect. So again, if you try something like king to e7 again, then bishop to g5 will happen, and it's simply game over. So really wild stuff. You see how important this move h5 is. We're already having this great attacking possibilities here. Knight to e7, knight to f3. Very nice and compact setup now by this minor pieces of white here in the center. Very nice knight activity here. Knight to c6, and now c3. Knight takes d4. We have knight takes d4 again. Stockfish NNUe locks here the c file. It's not allowing maybe here some queenside attacks on maybe some queen and rook batteries on the c file. Knight to d4, perfectly fine. And now we have knight to c5. Of course, Leela c0 is targeting here maybe weak square e4, but it still can be kicked away by potential f3 move. Maybe here after h6, here f6 was played. If you try here knight to e4, it's not so good. First of all, we can take bishop, and then maybe here even f3 is a possibility. Knight to g3, rook to h3, knight to f5. Very messed up position, I think, for black. We can even take and then maybe fix our pawn structure with the move f4. Really many ideas here for both sides, but as I said, outposts here are not possible around the square e4. So here after move h6, I think we have reached now one of the most critical moments of this game. Here, in my opinion, Leela c0 makes a mistake with the move f6. At least my engine at home gives that as a mistake. Maybe it's slightly better, but who knows, when these engines are playing, you cannot really calculate everything. Here g6, passing through simply. Okay, you had your fun on the king side, but maybe now it's time to maneuver pieces, trying to find good squares for the bishop. But still, it's a very messed up position, because even if you try to castle here, then you're vulnerable to some dark square attacks. Bishop to g5, bishop to f6 is also a possibility. So that's why it's unclear still. White is also better in this position. After the move knight to c5, h6, as I said, f6 was played, but now bishop to f4, simply supporting our centralized pawn. In the game, rook to g8 was played, and now a5. So you see, Stockfish NNUe attacks the both sides all over the board. We have g5 now, and now a great move, a takes b6. A counter attack. If you take here g takes f4, then you have really some troubles, because rook takes a7 will happen. If you move the queen, then queen to h5. Very brutal attack, and it's really something that you have to resign. So here after the move a takes b6, we have now a takes b6, and now bishop to e3 finally by Stockfish NNUe. We have f takes e5, and now comes knight to f3. And the problem now for this position is that you cannot attack the knight. If you try g4, you get simply knight takes knight takes e5, followed with knight takes g4. If you try e4 here to kick away the knight, then you get knight to e5, again a counterattack against the queen, queen to d6, and again queen to h5 is deadly here. Again, black is simply lost here. So really this attack by the queen is something that is always bothering black here in the position, I think. So after the move knight to f3, here we have bishop to d6, and now knight takes g5. You see this pawn is lost, this pawn is weak on h7, still the queen can come into the game, so that's why here rook to g6 was played by Leela c0, and now king to f1. Again, this new castling style, king to f1 by Stockfish NNUe, never castling in this blocked pawn structures, especially in the French defense. We have seen many times Stockfish NNUe simply maneuvering king to f1, never castle, because we need of course our pawn here on the h file, and now still the king is maybe slightly endangered, but still there are so many pieces in front of the king. Still we can play something like queen to g4 or maybe queen to h5 with threats to play knight to h7 and similar stuff. So still I think black's king is much more vulnerable to the attacks by white. So here e4, we have now this move queen to h5, very nice move, and now knight to b3 attacking the rook, and rook to d1. This knight is of course very well placed, it's attacking, but now you see the rook gets simply out of the range. We have now really the pieces on the best course. The queen is active, knight is active, bishop active, rook active, really great attacking setup. And you know when what Stockfish does when the Stockfish has a good attacking setup. Here after move knight to f5, Leela c0 tries to remaneuver the knight, maybe get it to c4, where it could attack at least the pawn here on b2, or maybe the bishop on e3, but now Stockfish prevents this idea with the move b3. The idea about this move is after rook to c3, now king to g1, and now we want to play now really sharp attacks here. Knight to e4 are possibilities here to open here the d file. Knight to h7 are also possibility. Queen takes g6 are possibilities to get here h7 h8 pawn breakthroughs. It's really wild game all over the board, although there are not so many pieces now on the board. Many pieces have been traded so far in the game, but still this is really a wild game. You see an open game, tactics all over the board. And here after the move queen to e7, here comes the stunner, queen takes g6. So sacrificing the queen, h6 g6, we have h7, bishop to e5. You see you have to protect. We have now h8 promotion, queen bishop to h8, still everything is a forced line. Rook to h8, we have king to d7, but now rook to h7, we're getting our piece back. Queen to h7, knight to h7, and now rook to b3. Let's stop and evaluate the position. Of course, black has some compensation. Black has 5 pawns. On the other hand, white has only 2 pawns. But the most important thing is that this bishop is stopping at least for a while black's potential progress here in the center, because you have to lose at least 2 tempi with e5, and then you can maybe continue to push with d4, but still you're also vulnerable to some attacks with knight to f6, knight to e4, maybe some sacrifices, knight to f6, knight to d5 is also a possibility. So you have to be careful here in the game. So that's why after the move knight to f6 here, king to c6 6 was played by Leela c0, rook to c1, we have king to d6, and now the rook comes behind. Of course, that's the so-called Tarrasch rule. The Tarrasch rule says we should always bring our rook behind our enemy's pawns. Very nice attacking style again by Stockfish NNUe. And we'll notice now a great attacking formation, because these 3 pieces are really dancing around the king, and there are even some checkmate threats if black plays this game incorrect. I'll show you now also what happened, of course, in the continuation, how you can get checkmated by the rook, bishop, and the knight. Here e5 played by Leela c0, and now bishop to g5. We have rook to d3, and now rook to g8, attacking of course the weak pawn here. Rook to d1, we have king to h2, rook to king to e6, attacking bishop to h4, knight to c4, and now rook to c8, attacking b5, rook to c6, and now the king has to move here, because you see, if you get your king here, then it's very dangerous, and then you get something like g4. It's very dangerous. Bishop to f4, knight to g8. It's also a possibility with some checkmate threats, knight to e7 and followed with similar stuff. So the king is really here endangered. You have to escape with your king here to f7. And in the game now, bishop to g5 supporting our knight. We have rook to d3, knight to g4, and now Leela C0 pushes the pawn. It seems like a very tricky idea. As you see, the evaluation is about equal. These pawns are rolling. D4 can happen, maybe E3 and similar stuff. So really Stockfish has also to calculate everything here in the game. Stockfish tries knight to H6, king to E8, and now on the rook to C7 we have now E3, and this move, I'm not sure what this move meant, why Leela C0 played this move. I'm not sure why you have to sacrifice here a pawn. Maybe you can analyze this game at home and try to answer this question. It was really unclear for me what happened here now after move E3, why you're giving up a pawn. Maybe you can push the pawn, at least you can push the pawn here on the D file, but here after move E3, f takes E3, you see now also in the continuation the importance of this particular pawn here. After move B3 we have now knight to G4, now you see knight to F6, and that's how Stockfish calculates this tactics. We have now a great attack. If you don't play now correctly, you can get checkmated by these three pieces. King to D8, we have knight to D5. If you take, of course, oh, pardon me, it says to check. So far it's not possible to take, it's a discover attack. So here knight to king to E8, we have rook to E7, we have king to D8, and now again a discover check after king to E8, rook to E7, and again Leela C0 tried the perpetual, but now rook to G7. And here comes the problem: if you get your king to E8, then you get checkmated with this great setup here, knight to C7, then you get knight to E6, you have only one square, the square E8, and then you get rook to E7. This would be a checkmate, so that's why after move rook to G7 you have to escape here to C8, but now rook to C7 here in the game, king to B8, and now Stockfish NNUe simply took. We have now the promotion, but now rook to B4. Look how Stockfish calculated this tactics all over the board. Decoy the king to the b file, and now simply traded off more pieces. And you see now this pawn is very important. It's protected by the bishop, and this is now bishop knight versus rook endgame. The problem is now the king is simply too far away from the action, and if Stockfish NNUe grabs one of this pawn, then it's a theoretical winning endgame here for white. So after rook to b4, we have rook to c3, knight to d5, we have rook to d3 attacking the knight, knight to b6, we have knight to c4, and now e4, and you see now Stockfish NNUe simply takes out this pawn. Here king to d6, and now knight to g6 is a possibility. King to e6, king to h3, of course you have to play with your king, and now rook to a4, although you could have played rook to e4, but again knight to h4, simply pushing off pass pawn. You will in one particular moment have to give up your rook for the pawn, or maybe you have to give up your rook for a minor piece, but then of course white is continuing the game with another minor piece and a pawn, then again it's a winning endgame. So here after the move rook to a4, king to g4 was played, rook to a2, and now king to h5, we have rook to a3. Here Leela C0 tried to attack, but Stockfish NNUe counter attack with bishop to h4, bishop to f6, bishop to h4, and now after a couple of perpetuals, simply g4 here by Stockfish NNUe, bishop to f6. Again, the king moves here towards the king side. Here, knight to f5. Really many moves have been played now in this endgame. King to g5, knight to g7. The king has to move, and you see now we're moving up this pawn, e6, king to g8. We have e7, rook to king to h7, and now after e8 the promotion, rook to e8 in this position. Leela C0 resigned because it's not a stalemate. We can simply take. You have again one square, and now you have to bring just your pieces out of the range. Don't try to get stalemate here. So that's why very important, maybe retreating with our pieces and simply push the pawn and promote the queen, and of course deliver checkmate then afterwards. So incredible game again by Stockfish NNUe. I really didn't want to show another Stockfish NNUe winning game. I wanted to show a Leela C0 game, but this was, I think, the decisive game. It could be maybe that this was the last winning game, maybe in the super final, and as I said, Stockfish leads by 1 point. All the other games were really wild. Leela C0 played also an outstanding games, really wild tactics. So even if Stockfish NNUe wins this game, I'm going to show you, of course, also some winning games by Leela C0. They were really incredible. Some King's Indian, Nidors, really sharp openings have been played. So be prepared. This will be still a wild final, because Leela C0 has, of course, the opportunity to equalize the result. Nothing's over for our Leela C0 fanboy club. Don't be sad. Leela can make it. Leela can still make it. So, okay, I hope that you enjoy this video. If you want to see more of this attacking brilliances and positional brilliances like this, check out my commented chess games played by computers. Here's the link to my whole series. We have analyzed so far more than 117 games about chess engines. Really wild stuff. And if you want to see the humans battling in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.